Hello, my friends. I hope you had a fantastic week so far. This week, I wanted to share quite a touching episode with Simon Rogers. Now, Simon helps people become their more powerful, more authentic self through some coaching methodology. But he was kind enough to share quite a sensitive and hopefully transformative reality that he had at the end of last year. So I'll hand over to him to explain a little bit more about what he does. Hope you take value from this interview, and I'll see you.
Oh, hi, I'm Simon Rogers from Enjoy Being You. I'm here to help people unbox their potential. The people that I typically work with, they are in some way in the way of their own success, and they know that. So they really want to figure out how do I unlock that? How do I unbox that potential to show up and create their version of success? So essentially, that's what I do.
I think your space is a really powerful one, but also a really interesting one as well. Because as we were talking a little bit before the show, we're in this weird economic challenge, right? That's kind of been followed by a weird economic challenge, followed by a weird economic challenge, followed by a weird economic challenge, right? Is there kind of a commonality that people could take, or like business owners that are maybe coming out into the market now, or were coming out in
Mm.
COVID, that you would initially say, right, here's a good starting point. Here's like, yes, this is what you need to tackle. This is what you need to look at, because I think there's a lot of either scarcity or just fear around where we are, right? Because for people my age, if you haven't done the historical research on like what happens in a recession and what happens and etc., right? Like it's terrifying because we've only known an up economy, right? We've only known it good, fantastic, money's up, but now it's not. So what do people do?
Yeah, yeah. I really think the most important thing in that is to understand what you really want. Like, what do you really want? Because if you don't do that, then you get swallowed by exactly all of the stuff that you've just said. And I really do think that on a level that this is challenging us to get really specific about there is a finiteness here in many forms. You need to decide what you really want to do, what really matters to you. So, which is something I'm very passionate about because that's why it's called Enjoy Being You. Because if you find your joy is that currency, that's another currency that actually lets you know you're on track, specifically when it actually may not be obvious that you are heading to your version of success. So you need something that's like the dotted line on a treasure map that lets are you on your dotted line on your treasure map or not? And if you're not, you want to get back on it very quickly. So you'll know the difference because one, you'll be swallowed in fear and anxiety. You're not on the dotted line on the treasure map. Or you're actually going, yeah, there's either there is external validation that you're on track, but that's not the key to continue going on track, or there isn't yet, but you feel that you're on track. And that's going to be key in navigating this time.
I really resonate with that, and I think something that I've been talking to a lot of my coaching clients about, but also one-to-ones, is this understanding that one's vision shouldn't necessarily be
Mm,
right. I'm
mm,
Some people say I'm known for my ridiculous vision nowadays, right? Which is great and a grateful place to be in. But for those who are new, my vision is to create the largest media company in the world, full stop, right? Whether I'll achieve that, different conversation, right? Sure. But that's the vision. That's the thing I'm striving towards. And because of the way I set goals, because of how I strive for growth, etc., which is going to be a kind of underground, kind of under part of this conversation, I think it's a really
mm,
interesting perspective, though. So, at a basic level, though, how does one, whether that's personally looking at themselves and really analysing what they're doing in their life, the decisions we're making, or yourself with a client, would you tackle, like, I don't know what my vision is, Simon? Because I was fortunate. I won the lottery, right? Absolutely won the lottery. Mother instilled the right values in me. I knew what I wanted to work for myself from
mm,
the age of 8. I knew from the age of 12 I wanted to be something in the creative field. So it was like, right, I've got like 5 years to work this out, really. And then I just need to build. That's
mm,
all I need to do, right? But I'm fully aware that doesn't happen, right? So how does someone
mm,
really, the question there is, how does someone get in touch or understand their vision at where they are in their life? And that's
mm,
the key point, because I've said this for a long time for this in my build stage. That's my vision. When I'm 30, 35, 40, it might be very different. My priorities might shift and change, which is a separate
Sure.
conversation entirely. But just to reiterate the question, how does someone connect with their vision that they should and could have now?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that's relevant right now and is that to see your vision clearly, you need to make space. You need to make space because your vision is speaking to you. It's like, what do you really, a view that understands your whole life from the moment you die until now, and they are, and it really is coming through you that you go, oh, I really understand it and I connect with it, and it really means something. It's not come from anybody else. It's actually come through you, right? And so to make space for something to come through you, you've got to clear head space out. You've got to clear heart space out. Your body's got to feel lighter. Your head's got to feel lighter. So what we're talking about is emotional pain. You've got to be able to you've got to face and be able to deal with emotional pain and let it go, process it, really let it go. Because if you can't do that, well, there's one thing that human beings really struggle with the most is emotional pain. They would rather be with loads of thoughts clogging up their head, distracting them, having all sorts of vices, addictions and all sorts, rather than focusing on the emotional pain. So to clear your head, the shortcut is to focus on the emotional pain. And then the vices disappear, your mental health gets a lot better, your physical health gets a lot better, and you feel like moving and doing all the things that are good for you because it just feels good. But you need to feel that. You need to feel the feel good bit. So how do you do that? Usually the point is meet yourself where you're at. And sometimes life feels really, really, really tough in the moment you're in. So accept that. Accept how it feels. And accept that it's maybe not even about right now. It's about like the stuff that has been in your life. And accept that. And we spoke briefly about that kind of radical responsibility for your life. It's not to point a finger, it's to actually start to go, because you claim back an ability to accept. A start point.
And I really resonate with
Right.
that, and I think it's really important when you go through something, which everyone has, right? Especially as guys, because something which I'm trying to do that I've made very clear that I'm going to do in content, but something I've tried to do this year specifically is let guys know that yes, you should be stoic, and yes, there's value in being stoic as a man. However, it's the context in which you're stoic, right? And for those who don't understand stoic, it's basically
Yeah.
acting in a way or acting in doing your duty as a man, doing the job, fixing a problem, etc. But that doesn't mean you don't have emotions, right? And this is the conversation I have with mental health experts and mental health people. It's like, for a long time, men were told, you're not allowed to have emotions, not teaching them stoicism. They're not the same thing, right? Teaching stoicism is understanding when you have a duty as a man to provide and protect from a traditional sense, right? When you need to do that. And having a high level of discipline is a different skill set to, I'm not allowed to have feelings, right? It's about the context in which we wrap those feelings around and who you're going to be that vulnerable with, right? And the reason why I'm so grateful to be here with you talking about this is because we're both men, right? Because I think sometimes, femininity as a concept, as in a feminine person, by proxy, are more likely to talk about their emotions, right? From a psychology and a biological point of view, they're more wired that way, right? But I think there is, to an extent, still a place, and there should still be a place for men to talk to other men about, and I don't just necessarily mean my second business, right? That is a place, but any space, a okay environment to actually talk about that, right? And say, you know what? It is okay to feel shit. You know what I mean? It is okay to go through emotional pain. Yeah, actually own your mistakes, which is the key, right? I think, and what someone was alluding to for those who were listening to the show in our previous conversation, I was talking about a situation that created a lot of emotional pain for me. But I said, well, yes, okay, that wasn't great. But what was my doing in that situation, right? What mistakes did I make? And I, as a man, as part of my duty and as part of growth, have to and should always take 100% responsibility for those mistakes, right? And I think we would be in
Mm.
a very, I'm going to use the term better world. I think if every
Mhm.
single person in the world took 100% responsibility for whatever they've done. Because you got
Mhm.
yourself in every situation that hurt you. You could have walked away.
Mhm.
But I guess the question there comes, why do we do that? Right? Because it's all very nice and very well and good from us on a growth journey talking about what we've done and the mistakes we've made. But why as humans, why as clients, audience member, me, you, do we get ourselves in that position in the first place?
Mm. Yeah, sometimes it's really hard to know that. And I don't think there's a global answer that's true for everybody. I think you have to look at the nuance of every situation to understand the learning. But that's one thing that I would say is that there's always a learning from it. But you can never glean that learning if you don't face the situation, if you don't face that reality. And it's not to say that you should or you must, because my God, it takes a lot of courage to do it. And sometimes, you can understand if somebody doesn't do that for their whole lifetime with some of the things that they experience. But it's to deeply realize that we're never victims. We're never victims of a situation. And if we ever feel like that, ultimately, we make ourselves powerless. And it sounds almost judgmental. It's not to say that, that somebody's done you wrong or something's not painful or something's happened that's incredibly painful. It's just not to take the identity as that position, because by taking that identity, it's sometimes an easy solution to wrap up the feelings that you don't want to feel. Uh, so yeah, I understand it. It's another way of just coping, it's tolerating, and that may be your only way of surviving. Brilliant. But the freedom that you might want to get at a deeper level and experience and is available to you does require you to let go of that identity and embrace the feelings, the emotions that are there as soon as you let go of it, and they'll come flooding at you. So I know there's a careful consideration that you let go of the label or not, but I think that men are more aware now. Um, there's more pain for us to face, and therefore it's a bit like a dam. Do I let it crack a little bit? Because if I do, it's going to start pouring out. And I think it's embracing, and this is coming into another subject, but we all have, in my opinion, we all have a feminine aspect to us and a masculine aspect of us. And actually, they're not like separate entities, they're woven together. It's an energy. And it's about embracing these aspects in ourselves. And when you do that, it might feel like, oh, you have to let go of these external labels of a man does this, a British man does this, stiff upper lip, and all of these things. When the reality is that by keeping to this label, you're sacrificing so much of your well-being in the moment and in your future, your connection with people, the joy that you could experience in this lifetime, so much that we are starting to realize that we're sacrificing with holding that status quo. So as much as it's painting the picture of what's the dynamic, it's also to paint the picture of what's beyond it as well. I think that's our certainly as coaches, that's part of our job to help people see the reality that's available to them beyond their current
Because I
circumstance.
think we passively, the people we work with, are in this concept of they don't know what they don't know, right? And part of our job is to say, hey, by the way, there's actually a lot more to what you're trying to do, the world, the opportunities, etc., than you can,
Mm,
right? Now, it's up to the client to decide whether they want to pursue those things, right? It's not down to
absolutely.
me or down to you. It's down to the client, right? Our job is to point it
Mm,
out, right? And our job is to say, by the way, that crossroads, and this is an analogy I always really like, right? That crossroads you're about to meet
mm,
and you're about to go to, don't turn left. Trust me. You can if you want, but
mm,
don't, because there's a bear at the end of that road
mm,
and it might want to eat you. I mean, if you want to get eaten by a bear, you're welcome to go down the road. But I'm telling you, there's a bear down there. So my recommendation would be go to the right, right? But sometimes I think we can have a high level of empathy and we can have a high level of, really, I guess in some ways understanding how someone feels. Maybe that's through our own shared experience or a similar situation. But sometimes people actually need to, like, I'll use the really obvious one, touch the hob to understand it's hot, right? And
Mm.
I think sometimes, I know I've been talking to a lot of people about this, about like how does trust get built and how does like real trust, I mean like depth trust, really gets built. And the
Mm.
science kind of shows it's through shared suffering, right? So
Mm.
actually, you know, the people who you have really close to you, if they stay close to you during a really bad time, you can pretty much understand and pretty much believe that they're going to be with you for a very long time, because the level of trust and the level of depth, and you know they're going to have your back, right? But I
Mm.
think sometimes I think we want that, like, I mean, this comes from social media, this comes from like life in general, right? We want this endorphin hit of like, yeah, it's fun, it's great, I get a happy feeling, right? But the best things and all the meaningful things take a fuck ton of time, right? Like a
Mhm.
ridiculous, uncomfortable amount of time to build, right? I'm in a very fortunate position where Brunt Media is doing really well in every aspect of what that means right now. Fan freaking tastic. Thank you so much, right? But what people didn't see or appreciate is this is 6.5 years in the making. This is not like my overnight
Mm.
success. It's 6.5 years of hard work and dedication. But how do
Mm.
you, in regards to a question there, right? How do you, because we're talking about fixed mindsets and growth mindsets here. If
Mhm.
someone has a struggle, because I never really had this issue, but I know some clients have really struggled with having a vision. They have this idea of the vision, but they don't, I guess in some ways, they don't let it connect with their mind, right? As in, so they can physically
Mm.
see it in their mind's eye, right?
Mm.
How would you tackle that from a client coaching point of view to really help someone be like, you have this vision, but you need to believe that it's possible? Because I think once you believe it's possible,
Mm.
then literally the world is your oyster, right? Quite literally, right?
Mm.
But if you don't
Mhm.
actually believe yourself that it's possible, you won't be able to have the drive to do the work, right?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think there are a couple of aspects to that, and this actually brings in the topic of it's a book that I've recently been listening to. I listen to audiobooks most of the time. It's called Visual Thinking by Temple Grandin, and essentially, she's a huge spokesperson for autism and neurodiversity. And through her own self-discovery and her own research, she's uncovered that in general, we have two types of thinking: visual thinking and our kind of more conventional, like verbal thinking, which is basically what our whole academic system is set up for. So most people assume that everybody's verbally thinking, that the first thing, almost in the precursor of every thought is literally language. But actually, for a lot of people, and a lot of people that have different ideas about things, or innovate, or pioneer, or see things differently, um, they are actually visual thinkers. And most people, or in fact, almost everybody who's neurodiverse, are visual thinkers. And I would actually say that I'm a precursor is visual thinking. So I will literally see solutions to things that precedes language. So then I have to translate it into language. So even though I'm relatively articulate, that's something you may notice. There's a slowness to it as well. That's calmness, but it's also the fact that my first language is pictures, and then I translate it into words. So that's so now coming to the vision, I believe that in order for you to have your own vision, you need to feel it in your body as well. Can't just flash through your head, because you don't know the difference between your vision and just a random thought. And if you're going to commit a lot of your resources to it, your time, effort, energy, you need to feel that this is right for you. So how do you feel that? You got to trust your gut. Where's your gut? It's not in your head. You got to trust your heart. Where's your heart? It's not in your head. So you've got to be in your body. You've got to be there and feel that. Does this vision that's coming through you, does it match up with your heart? Does it match up with your gut? Does it feel good? Do you feel joy when you connect it, when you imagine this happening in your life? If you don't, probably not worth it. Probably not your vision.
And this is I think the
So
key when it comes to, my vision. Simon's vision,
Mm,
Gary's vision, Bob's vision, Sally's mission, etc. Because they are different, right? The things I'm willing to
mm,
sacrifice is because my greater purpose, my greater meaningful change for me is more important.
mm,
Me building a media company that has a huge legacy attached to the name Brunton is more important
mm,
than the short term in my 20s doing 20-year-old
yeah.
things, right? That's more important. But also, being able to live my life on my terms is more important for me now and when I'm 30, 40, 50, 60, so on, right? So I'm willing to sacrifice this period of my life to mean that I can have a life that many will not afterwards, right?
Mm,
But I think sometimes it comes from, and this is the growth aspect, and this is the catalyst of how I look at pain, right? And how, well, that's emotional pain, physical pain, mental pain, etc. There's a level of, okay, this is kind of what I've gone through, and it's got me to this stage, and it is who I am, right? Because if I didn't, and that's why I'm always grateful. Everyone says, why are you grateful for your adversity? Why are you grateful for your pain? That's a weird thing to be grateful for. But then
mm,
I explained to them, I
mm,
said, well, firstly, I wouldn't know what happiness and joy and content, love, and connection is because I have nothing to contrast it with.
mm,
Like if you don't know the opposite
mm.
ends of those, you don't know, you have nothing to contrast it with. But also number two, I wouldn't be
Yep.
who I am. I wouldn't have the experiences. I wouldn't have the shared suffering. I wouldn't have the pain. I wouldn't have the pain tolerance. I wouldn't have the mindset. I wouldn't have the growth potential. I wouldn't have any of these things if I hadn't gone through what I had gone through. And this isn't like pointing a finger at the people who put me in this position. No, to an extent, within reason, most of them are my fault, right? Most of them, I take 100% accountability for why I was in those shitty situations, right? But also,
Mm,
I also am 100% grateful for me being in those because it has allowed me to become the
mm,
person I am today. And that's why, I remember it's about a year ago now, I was talking to a long-term friend of mine about this, and I was like, no, I wouldn't change anything that's happened to me. No, I wouldn't change any of the quote-unquote issues, even the fact I have dyslexia, because it makes
mm,
me who I am. It allows me to do and
mm,
talk and articulate myself and be the brand and be the entity and be Colton, who Colton is, right?
mhm,
And I
mhm,
truly am eternally grateful that my mum installed the right values in me from day one, which was you need to love yourself wholeheartedly, yourself. As in, I need to love Colton before I can love anyone else, right? And
yes.
that is one of the most powerful things that if you're going to take anything from this show, I would hope you would take because it is the most powerful. Because then you don't have preconceived judgments. Then you don't have self-esteem issues. Then you have a high level of self-confidence. But quickly for the audience, because I think some of the audience might perceive it as you're egotistical, not self-confident. What is the difference between the
Mm,
two? Because I've been called, I don't know, I'm sure you've been called, many people have probably been called that have a quote unquote ego or are self confident, have self belief, etc. Oh, Colton, you're egotistical. What are the distinguishing
mm,
factors between the two? Because I personally understand the difference, but that's because I've looked at it and gone, is that what I would perceive it as? No.
mm,
What's your view on that? I mean, because there's a fine line, right, between the two.
mhm. Yeah, I think there is, and I think it requires the more you express yourself in a way, you need to become more self-aware. And so I'd probably add these two words in there, humility and ability. You think when you're as you grow, your ability naturally grows, and your humility should always exceed your ability. And I think if you always have that, your humility always exceeds your ability, then you don't have to worry about your ego. It's always there with you. It's part of being human. But if you really understand what your life is about, what you want to bring and share as a consequence of accepting it for yourself first, then you don't need to worry about your ego. That's for somebody else to decide if they see it or not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But I would add this though, is that my biggest value is love. That is absolutely the guiding light. Is the easiest thing to focus on, to go, that helps me in every single situation. And so if if I always look at how can I be more loving, and not to say that I am loving, it's just how can I, from the perspective where I am, where I see myself being, how can I meet myself where I'm at and be more loving? That is basically how I run my life. It really is that simple. And so, do I succeed in it sometimes? Do I? And sometimes not. But I'm always grateful for the experience of life, always carving that out of me. You see, I don't regret anything. And then one example of that is, and this is something we spoke about in advance of the of talking, is that I had a really challenging start to the year over Christmas. And I haven't shared it with loads of people. Certainly, I've shared it with people privately, and I've shared it with clients and things that are in situations that are relevant. But I think I'd like to share it with more people, just because it's I'm sure loads of people have gone through exactly the same or going through something similar than this. And there's something that I've learned through it. I'd love to share. I'd love to share that, something that you can glean out of it. And I've always believed in facing adversity head on. Well, one of my people that I love the most in my life is my dad. And he's always been well until Christmas Eve, and he had 2 seizures just unexpectedly, completely out of the blue. And the next thing, paramedics were there. I was diving in there, and my dad's half conscious, and the thing that was holding me was love. Was love to be there. I wanted to be there with my dad, with the paramedics there, mum there wailing, brothers there, and family there, and I wanted to be there for him, like holding his mask, being there. I don't know what I was going to do, but I wanted to be there, right there. And I'm so proud of myself for being there. But the only thing that held me there, because it was incredibly painful, it's incredibly painful, was living out literally a nightmare that you don't even have because you don't even want it to become a reality. But it was happening right then. So I wanted to be present in everything, like in my body, in my heart, in my gut, in my head. I want to be here. And that's what I did. And ever since then, I've done a pretty good job of being that for myself. Sometimes not so much. And then it bottles up some sadness, and I have to go for a walk or whatever, or talk to somebody or cry or whatever it is. But that's the one thing, is that if you can find love in yourself, it helps you to dive into the pain. And the pain's not there to torture you. It's to carve out. It's like to make the sculpture of the life and the person you want to become. And it's doing that. It's also helping you from that same space. It just doesn't feel like it at that moment. If you find love first and you feel that, actually everything becomes possible.
Yeah. And firstly, thank you for sharing that, because I think so many people are going to relate to that. But I think it does give a very strong level of perspective, and that's the caveat, the point. I don't want to add on here. It
Yeah.
feels weird to add on, but like to add on in respect to, like, and I'll speak about my adversity for a long time, but the thing that got me through all of it was the perspective of it's actually going to be fine, right? This season, this period, this time sucks.
Mm.
Okay,
Yes.
that's cool. It sucks. I'm going to own that.
Mm.
I'm going to be okay with that.
Mm.
I'm going to do my best,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And then it's going to get better. And that is the bit which I think sometimes people don't think about. Sometimes people find it hard to think about when they're going through this. That it could be for any reason, but at the time it feels like this all-consuming pain that's just going to be there forever. Especially on like day 1, day 2, day 3, right? Of whatever, like,
Yeah.
etc., right? But with time, it does ease, right? And I think one has to trust in oneself to be able to get through that with the understanding and the perspective. And in that period, be extremely kind to oneself. And be like, I've only done 2 hours work today. I've only managed this. I've only managed that. I've only, etc. right? And if you also then have combined pressures on top of that as well, you're like, bloody
Mm.
hell, okay, hold on a sec, right? But then being kind and be like, no, I'm still moving forward. I might be moving a quarter of the speed I'm used to, or I might be only doing that tiny amount, but I'm doing that tiny
Yeah.
amount. And I think
Yes.
sometimes we like, oh, I feel really tired, or this. We don't give ourselves that moment of understanding of like, when you're healing from something that emotionally painful, yes, it's going to have a knock on
Mm.
effect on your work capacity. Yes, it's going to have a knock on effect on your physical capability. Yes, you're probably going to want to eat shit. Yes, you're probably going to be a bit more
Mm.
snappy and a bit more to people you care about and love. But I guess the follow on question there is, if someone is going through that, or unfortunately, it's a matter of time until we all go through it again, right? Because that's the reality of
Sure.
life.
Yeah.
We have these
Yeah.
seasons at the moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes some people's seasons will be woo, winning. Other people's seasons will be mellow, we're good. Other people's seasons will be the world is over, right? But
Mm.
how do you? I guess in some ways, I guess the question there is, how do you one stay grounded so that they're not on the
Yeah.
moon or they're not in the ditch?
I think it's a brilliant question. I forgot I didn't actually set the whole context of what actually happened to my dad. So the seizure, and then he's diagnosed with brain cancer. So that's obviously obvious to me. Now it's obvious to you. But that is an ongoing thing, and ultimately he probably has 12 to 18 months to live, and it's not known because it's different for each individual. So it's an ongoing thing. So the reason I say that is then it gives a context to the answer that I will give, because I can only share with you, my experience with it is that I, I really think that it's about being present, grounded, to stay grounded in a situation, to not go off with a narrative. You need to have a perspective that whatever pops up in your head is not necessarily the truth. You're going to have tens of thousands of thoughts every single day. Most of them are not going to be true. So how do you know when something's true or not true? Well, the best way is to stay grounded. Grounded literally means to have your energy, your awareness in your whole being, not floating outside. And we know, like scientifically, when people experience traumatic moments, they literally feels like they're fleeing their body, right? And a lot of people also stay there. That's the weird thing. We're all staying there to a degree. The traumatic experiences that we experience, we stay in our heads. We get addicted to things that extensions to our brains, right? And that becomes our vice. And you can have pseudo spirituality and all sorts of things that are exactly the same thing. Really, is to embrace yourself. You, you are a part of something bigger, but you have to claim your own part. You have to be present with it. You have to be in your own experience. It's not embracing. People can point to it outside of you, but you have to know it for yourself. And the only way to know it for yourself is to be in it, experience it, come back to it. And if you're struggling to come back to it, then do it one step at a time. And gradually you start to go, yeah, I got my energy back. I'm here. I'm present. I can drive it in the direction of whatever contribution you want to make in your life and the experience you want to make. But do recognize that you need to be present to make those best decisions for you, because the guidance is a feeling more often than a thought. And if you're only in your head or you're out of your head, hard for you to trust yourself if you're guiding, making the right decisions, actions in your life. And that's one of my big passions is supporting people to come back into their body and be able to use all their faculties and their abilities to make their lives a meaningful, joyful experience. And that drives me, that drives me in my own experience as well. I love being of service to people. That comes from love, right? That's the value. So yeah, it starts with that love of the experience, love of yourself and your life. And when I say yourself, no identity. It's just the experience moment by moment of being me. I'm grateful for it. And yeah, there's also at times plenty of pain there as well. So, oh, well, let's work with that as well then.
And the add-on I'll add there is it's so personal, right?
Mm.
One's job of our
Yeah,
clients coach, the
yeah,
people we coach, the people we support, the
yeah.
people we are there. Our job is not to say this is what you do, this is how you do it. It's to say this is what has happened to me in the past. This was the result. I can see a correlation in these patterns, and what I'm going to tell you is that way is a bad idea. Right? That way causes pain. Confirm. At the end of the day, if the client still wants to go that way, that's up to them. That's their own personal, their own sovereign individual. They can do what they choose. However, I think that one of the reasons and one of the values that we add as coaches is we can, to an extent, where relevant, speed up that process of growth, because we can say, well, I've done this, 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 and that's the most effective path to do that because I've done all of them, right? But I think sometimes there's limiting beliefs, there's things in the way, there's hurdles, whether they're psychological hurdles or social hurdles or conditioning hurdles or etc., that get in our way, our clients' way, people listening to this way, etc., to really strive towards that uncomfortable goal, that uncomfortable reality. Because as those who know how I set goals, I set them ridiculously uncomfortable. Well, I said earlier in this podcast, I want to create the largest media company in the world. That's ridiculous, right? But the point is not about whether I achieve the goal. The point is to always have something to chase. That's the point, right? Because I may not never achieve that, but the goal is to have that to chase so that what if I get halfway, right? What if the actual achievement is me getting halfway? That would mean we're the largest in the UK. That's still a feat and a half, right?
What an amazing person you'd be in the process of
Again,
that.
that's all perception. That's all perception, right? Because some would go, "You've changed from the person that you were, and I preferred that other person," right? So that's why it's like, is it amazing? It's amazing within subjective terms, right? To some, it would be yes, Colin's this amazing person who hopefully is really compassionate and still very humble and blah blah blah. But actually, Colton today won't be the same Colton tomorrow, and so on. And I think that's the thing that is uncomfortability about growth, because. And I did a post a couple of months back talking about growth is like actual personal development and actual personal growth is ridiculously isolating and ridiculously lonely, right? You can be surrounded by people, but you also need to appreciate that 99 to 99.9% of those people you're going to outgrow if you're really serious about growth. And for the record, you should as well, right? Because if you're actually going to take your growth journey seriously, every single person, every single client, every single friend, arguably even some ways, some of your family to an extent, they'll still be in your life but not in the same way, you will outgrow, right? And it's a very, very minute few that will be there constantly, right? Now, they're cherished and glorious and wonderful and eternally grateful for those people in my life, and I'm sure you're eternally grateful for the people in yours. But they're 0.1%, right? They are, I can count on one hand, kind of level of people, right? So I guess the question comes there is, how does someone, you never feel comfortable with that, but how does someone come to terms with that reality? Because that is the reality of legitimate growth, right?
I think it's deciding what you want. You got to decide, like, do I want to grow? And if I don't want to grow, what are the consequences of that? So I'm not saying that should. I'm not saying one thing I would say is that life is constantly growing. That's one thing that is a constant in life. So there are consequences of not growing. So you can use that. And that's often why we get pain, is because we're at the back end of our growth, of our potential. And it's like, oh yeah, but you've got to come with this though. So which is a lesson in itself, is that we have not been growing. If you're feeling pain to a degree, usually that is because you have not been growing fully to your potential. The other end of the spectrum that's pulling you along is also joy. And I do want to make sure that's like super clear, is that I've learned a lot from pain, a lot from suffering, and then learning that if I stop resisting pain, I don't suffer. And then I did the learning, right? So eventually that got into my head. I'm a bit of a slow learner. I would say the next point is that once you start going, yeah, I can get better at not suffering, like I don't need to resist it, you're still kind of pushed along. You modulated the pain, but you still get pushed along and you're growing, but you can engage with that even more. And that is the joy. That is joy, looking further ahead and going, I really get what this life's about. And it's really vulnerable to do that. It's a different type of pain now, because now it's like you really have to be willing not to know. One of the hardest types of pain is just like, I just don't know. I just don't know. And that's very hard for human beings right now, not to know. Yet a lot of certainty, the way of dealing with any type of pain is just to, well, I'll be right. I have an opinion about it, right? And that creates an illusion of certainty because it's a mental stance that's staying the same. But there's very few things that are absolutely true. So one that thought you once had that just started its way into your brain, and you thought, no, that's the way it is. that suddenly gets farted off again. That's the worst I get in terms of my language, and that's and that I really think that we have so much more capacity than we ever realized. All of us, and that's why my tagline is unboxing your potential, because it does feel a bit like unboxing it, and there's pure potential coming out. And why the name of the business is called Enjoy Being You, because it's a message in itself. And I'm working my best on that as well.
This point that I think everyone, and the 2 points I'll end the show on is, the only place you should be comfortable if you are in a growth stage or in a growth journey is the uncomfortability of growth, number one. Number two, you're constantly evolving whether you choose to grow or not, right? The only thing certainty in life is change. That's it, right? Now, you can either embrace that change and have it on your terms, or it can be on the media, the news, the world, your ex, your wife, your friend, your mother, father, sister, brother, etc. terms, right? I know which one I would prefer, is all I'll say, right? The question to the audience to consider is, which one do you want? Who do you want to be in control, right? But for those who have enjoyed this conversation, taken something from this conversation, found value in this conversation, where's best for people to connect with you, Simon, outside of this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's easy to find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way to connect with me. There are lots of Simon Rogerses, as you can imagine. But what I can do is I can send you the link, though, Carlton, so that people can just click on that with the video. And send me a message there. I'm always very keen to get to know people, curious to get to know what you'd like to change and what you'd like to solve. So please do feel free just to share with me. I always offer time to explore that with everybody. So feel free to message me.
And for a final piece of advice for those who may be going through pain, maybe concerned about the economy, concerned about where their business future is, what would you say they should focus on right now?
Clear things out to start with. If you're making problems up, there's only one real big problem. So don't try and solve all the problems, and start by then clearing out so you can focus on what one problem is. And once you've got it down to one problem, what might help you do that is face it, feel it, let it go. And keep doing that. Face it, feel it, let it go. And after a while, you'll realize that all of the other problems become irrelevant, and you've got one problem. And actually, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. And then you dive through that one.
Thanks so much, ladies and gents, for coming back and joining me once again. I hope you took value from this interview with Simon. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode of the show. We'll be talking about something else that will help you move your business or your life forward in this very interesting economic chime that we find ourselves. Thank you ever so much for coming back and listening to me once again, and I'll see you very